Good day. This is Godliness with Contentment, episode 20. Well, my name is Keno Hanna, and I'm here to have a conversation about how to win with money from the Bible's perspective. To stay out of any legal trouble, I must say that the contents of this podcast are informational in nature. If you need professional advice, please consult your lawyer, financial advisor, or accountant. So it's the big 2-0. October 1st was the first time I published, October 1st of 2022. And this is now my 20th podcast episode. So for me, that's pretty amazing, right? Because if I didn't start, I wouldn't be here today. And it's interesting because what we're talking about today is getting started for a lot of people. Today, we're talking about having an emergency fund. Our scripture of the day is found in Proverbs 21:20. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. The picture I see in my mind for the fool is someone eating, drinking, not thinking about tomorrow. And I know tomorrow's not promised. But what happens when you eat and drink everything, you make it to tomorrow, and then you have nothing? The other thing that I believe, and I know, and doesn't say it in this particular passage, but the fool does not trust in God. He trusts in what he sees. We could actually be foolish if what we do is we store up stuff because we trust in them. There is wisdom in saving because God tells us to in the scriptures. But we are not to put our trust in what we save. We are to put our trust in the God who tells us to save. So yes, save. Be wise, not foolish. So when you get started on your money journey, the best thing is to have an emergency fund. I think of it as a kind of buffer or a cushion between you and life. Some people call it a rainy day fund, an umbrella. It's a necessity. Where I live, we have hurricanes, big, bad hurricanes at times. The storm can come and wipe out your job, your home, your car. And once you make it after the storm, you need to live. An emergency fund will help you to make it for a little while until you get back on your feet, right? Until the electricity is back on and the job starts up again. So here I use a hurricane as an emergency, and that may be a one of those extreme situations. But if you live where I live, this could happen once a year or every couple of years, right? Depending on the weather. But some valid things to use the emergency fund for is, well, one, I just mentioned a hurricane. So you can think of natural disasters, tornado, snowstorm, anything that's going to cause damage and stop you from perhaps making money, right? And so you need to dip into that emergency fund. One of the other things is job loss. Obviously, you lose your job, you need to make ends meet, and it'll be great to have something there, that buffer. Vehicle repairs, right? Perhaps you need your vehicle. It's a necessity, not just something you want. You need it for your job, you need it for your family, and the public transportation just won't work for you, right? Then there are medical emergencies. Well, I say it's emergency, so by its very nature, you need to use an emergency fund for it. So you have to go to the doctor, you need medication, that kind of thing. Other emergencies that can come up are family emergencies, right? Perhaps there's a death in the family, or or your loved one, someone very close to you is sick and they need help, different situations. So not everything that happens is an emergency. So that's one thing I want to clarify. But we need to know what an emergency is. We also need to know what's not an emergency. So I'm going to give you 5 things that you should not use your emergency fund for. Don't use it to start a business. And you may say, but I should. Well, I say you shouldn't. Why? Because even in your business, you need an emergency fund. Right? There are going to be months when things are not going the way they should go. The revenue is not coming in. The bills are increasing. And so even your business needs an emergency fund. If you take your personal emergency fund and put it into the business, and then the business isn't doing well, it's suffering, or, unfortunately it fails, your emergency fund is gone. So don't use your emergency fund to start a business. Vacation. Don't use your emergency fund to go on vacation. Yes, you're going to have a great time. And yes, you can come to the Bahamas, but don't use your emergency fund to do that. You're going to go back home. What if something happens? You have nothing, right? Save for vacation. Don't use your emergency fund for eating out, right? Don't use it to go out to expensive restaurants, to, enjoy the steak and the lobster and the shrimp. No. Right? You put that in your budget. Perhaps once a month, you have maybe $50 there or $100 specifically for eating out. That's not what your emergency fund is for. Do not use your emergency fund to buy that new dress, that nice jacket, the latest iPhone. You don't need them. You can get by without them. You've gotten by without them up to this point. You can continue to get by without them. Don't use your emergency fund for gifts, right? So gifts for you, we kind of just covered that, but also not gifts for friends, not gifts for family. And we are, almost 2 months removed from it, but Christmas is not an emergency. You know it's coming. Plan for it, right? Start planning for Christmas from January. And then when it comes, November, etc., it's not an emergency. You know it's coming. You plan for it. You put aside each week or each month or whatever some funds for Christmas. So, one thing I didn't say before is that if you have not saved before, right, you're not used to saving, you're more of a spender, then saving for something like an emergency fund that you may say may not happen may seem crazy. And in addition to that, saving by itself can be hard work. But I look at the emergency fund as having a peace of mind, right? It's insurance for when crazy happens. And for most of us, crazy stuff happens. And we need to be able to cushion, buffer that blow. We need an emergency fund. So an emergency fund will actually help you, because this is the first thing, like I said, when you're starting your journey towards financial freedom, is an emergency fund will help you to start building up your saving muscles, right? So you get stronger as you go on, okay? Some tips for your emergency fund. So first thing you want to do is go after getting a starter emergency fund. What do I mean by that? Well, at least $500 or perhaps $1,000. In the long term, you really want to have like 3 to 6 months worth of expenses saved up for your emergency fund. We personally go with 3 months worth of expenses, but I suggest holding off on this 3 to 6 months worth of expenses until after your consumer debt is gone. So if you have credit card debt or a car loan, a personal loan, pay those off first before putting aside your 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. But start with your starter emergency fund. That's why we start with it, of at least $500. But if you can get $1,000 and put aside for crazy, that's some good stuff. So when you go to save up the 3 months of expenses, that stuff's hard, right? That is nothing to laugh at or to play with. Even right now, you might be saying, I can't even save $500. $1,000 is super challenging. 3 months is flat crazy. It may sound like a luxury to you, but when crazy happens, it's a lifesaver. So, let's talk about where we put this money. So, we personally use our local credit union. It's not as accessible as our regular account at the bank, right? And our bank account has a debit card, so we can go to the ATM, we can withdraw, we can, go out to dinner or the gas station, we use the card, right? You want to put this emergency fund out of sight in a safe place. And no, under your mattress does not count. The idea here isn't about making money on interest, but it's about having it safe, and it's not super easy to access, right? There's no card attached to it, but it's still accessible when you need it, okay? Now, put in your mind, so this is going to help you with mindset when it comes to this emergency fund, right? You've saved up your $500, your $1,000. You've put it in a safe place in a local credit union or money market account. Put in your mind that you will say no. You will say no to yourself when wants come up. Not emergency, but when wants come up, you'll say no. Don't think, I have $500 sitting there doing nothing. I have $1,000 sitting. I can use that. Tell yourself no. The last thing I'm going to say on this is this. Because someone else has an emergency, it does not mean that you have an emergency. Now, if you think that way, you're not going to be popular. But I did say earlier, right, you're going to have situations and circumstances where family emergencies happen and it's close enough and it's going to count and you will use that money to help them. But that doesn't mean that you're helping everybody with that emergency fund, right? There'll be time for that later, right? After you get rid of debt, you save up your 3 to 6 months, and God's going to put you in a situation where you can help more people, but you got to start with yourself first. And what happens is, let's say you use your emergency fund or some of it, right? Your car has something that needs to be fixed, and let's say it's $500. You go get $500, fix the car. What you're going to do is when you get paid again, you're going to start putting that money back. You're going to build it up again, back to the 500, back to the 1,000, okay? And then you go back working on paying off the consumer debt. And then after the debt, like I said before, then you want to build up to at least 3 months worth of expenses. But the emergency fund is a necessity. It's like you bringing the umbrella to the rain. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you join me for my next podcast episode along with your friends and family. Please let others know how to find it, get the help they need as well. They can find it on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn. Just tell them to look for Godliness with Contentment. This is Keno Hana signing off. Check you later.